So greetings, everyone. We're so glad to have you here this evening. I am Regina Garcia, and I, along with my very apt co-host, Miss Karen Stewart, would like to say thank you for coming on behalf of NCPS Presents. We're so excited this evening to have among us one of our own, Bruce Spang. Bruce Spang is the Poet Laureate of Portland, is the author of 2 novels. He's also published 5 books of poems, including To the Promised Land Grocery and Boy at the Screen Door from Moon Pie Press. He is the poetry and fiction editor of the Smoky Blue Literary and Arts magazine, and he teaches courses in fiction and poetry at Great Smokies Writing Program and lives in Candler, North Carolina. And we are just so very glad to have you here. Bruce, I'm pinning you and the floor is yours.
Good. I want to get started right away because there's a lot to cover. And but first I want to do some introductions. And so if we could just go around and do brief introduction, I'd like the introduction to be sort of focused on poets that you really admire in their presentation and what it is that you really liked about their presentation. And so they could be named poets, famous ones, or they could just be local ones, but who they are, and then what is it that they did that really made you relate to what they were saying and really were engaged with what they were saying. So I don't know, is everybody going to participate, including Regina and Karen? So we could just start with whomever starts and then go from there.
Karen, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'll always start. So poets I love whose work inspires me. There are so many. E. Cummings, I love Cummings' poetry, the wordplay, the surprise. There's mystery in it. It's just the lines are art to me. I don't know. I just love it so much.
Have you heard him?
He's my
have you
number
heard
one.
him? Have you heard him read?
I don't know that I have. In my head he does because I read them out loud to myself.
He's a good reader. He's a good reader, and he has a staccato sort of delivery when he's
really?
reading. So you can hear him online, but he's got a very interesting sort of way of presenting, which mimics the sort of way the words sort of fall on the page. It pops out at you as he's reading his things. So what I'm looking at is also somebody who you've heard read, and what it is that you liked about how they read or presented their poems. Darcy?
I love Diane. I'm listening to Diane Seuss a lot.
Okay, she's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Darcy, do you have someone?
I do not.
Okay.
I'll pass for now.
Michael?
I think Keith Flynn is a great reader. If you've heard Keith, you're likely to get a song just as well as a poem read. Marvelous voice and cadence to his work. Also like Greg Lobus, who's recently won an award for his chat book about being a fireman, left of center. He's a good reader. So is Karen Jackson, another local poet whose recent book is If You Choose to Come. Those are some fine people who do a really really good job with their pacing and cadence and reading.
Great. Regina?
Okay, I'm just sitting here thinking because I know so many great poets. In regards to poets that I love to hear read, the first one that actually pops into my mind, of course, is Lucille Clifton.
Mm,
And what I like so much about her reading is the emotion that comes through her voice. Not, and I'm not even I'm not even thinking of things like articulation. Although she's wonderful in almost every aspect. But I think the thing that draws me the most is that when she reads, it is very natural. It does not sound like something necessarily performative, but very real, and it pulls you into what she's saying. So yeah, Lucille Clifton, I like Sonia Sanchez, I like Jackie Shelton Green, whose readings, whose poetry often does revolve around interactions with nature, the personification of nature, nature as witness. And so I love the way that flows as well. So yeah.
good. Joan?
Well, someone also mentioned Diane Seuss, but I'll go over the top with Diane Seuss. She has been my poetry crush for a couple years. And I've seen her do classes. I've watched videos of her doing readings, and it's her directness, honesty, frankness, and wit. She leaves it all on the field.
Right. So Judith, you're a little invisible, but you can hear us. And your sound is off right now. There you are.
Okay. Now, there. Oops. Okay. I was very much impressed with Billy Collins, Poet Laureate a number of years ago. I love his poetry. He's very accessible. And that's what I like it. And he states things very simply. And I enjoyed I had the privilege of hearing him read once. And it was lovely. I mean, you could just follow it along. I find many times if I don't have the written word in front of me, I'm not quite getting what the poet is saying. But
Right.
you didn't need it with Billy Collins.
Yeah, and he's very comedic too.
Yeah, yes. Everything that was.
Oh, you froze. Oh, she went. Oh well. So either Julia or Marilyn. And Maya Angelou. Oh my gosh, she was such a wonderful reader. I heard her 2 or 3 times. Yeah, she was a performer, a singer, and she knew exactly what she was doing. So I'll get started. And
Okay.
does Julie or Marilyn want to say anything?
Marilyn in the chat said Maya Angelou, because she could read a phone book and touch me emotionally.
Right.
That's perfect.
Michael
So
Rickshaw, did he? I saw you trying to say something. Did you?
Yeah. I just.
Oh, Michael, did you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've been out of circulation for about 20 years. I was very active with the poetry groups in Dallas about 20 years ago, and of course back then had plenty of poets that I worked with all the time, and was very had a lot of names that I could mention. Although I've only just really gotten back into poetry here in the past month or so, so I couldn't really say that there's names that I can name, but I do know that when I'm listening to someone, presenting their poem, it works best for me when what they say and how they say it matches the flow of the poem. And so if it's a sad poem, then, present it in that essence. It's like a song, the music and the words should all go together. And the presentation of a poem should go with the content of the poem so that it all becomes one thing and not, present it one way, but have a totally different context of the words that are being presented.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally it does. So we'll get started. Julie, did you want to say anything or did we miss you? Sounds off. Well, we'll get started. One of the things I want to do right at the beginning is do a little exercise and kind of put you back in second grade. Fold your arms the way you normally do. Just fold your arms. They're settled in? Okay. Fold them the opposite way. So what happens when you have to fold them the opposite way?
I think you have to think about it.
You have to think about it.
Yeah, because I did kind of a shuffle over here.
Yeah, and it's not natural. It doesn't feel natural to you. And so you have to kind of consciously work at it. Rule of thumb about just behavioral learning behaviors, it takes 20 times. If you were to practice 20 times to fold them the right way, since most of you folded them incorrectly, then if you practice them the other way, it would become natural. So anytime you're learning anything new, there's going to be resistance. You're going to probably sort of be a little bit put off by something that's going on. So as I'm working with you tonight, some of these things may feel like, that's not me, that's not natural. And that's true. It won't be natural. And what I am saying is that if you work at it and you practice it, it will become natural. So there's a lot of skills involved in presenting a poem. And I think everything that you said, all of the different ones here, is really important. One of the things that needs to happen is you need to read the poem and let people feel and hear it as you tried to write it on that page. So that word by word, line by line, it expresses emotionally what's going on when you wrote the poem and as you worked on the poem. There's a certain, if a poem is good, emotional arc in a poem. So there isn't going to be the same mood or tone or even facial expressions at different parts of a poem or even within a line. And part of learning, I think the art of presenting a poem is learning to pace it correctly. Since presenting in front of a group is the second greatest fear most people have. Most people dread getting in front of an audience and speaking. And if you like doing it, you're an aberration. And people think sometimes because you can get up in front of people and talk that you're intelligent. And so they elect you to office. But, that's not necessarily true. It's a skill that you learn. And once you have it, you can perform and do things. I think the word performance might have a sort of weird connotation. What I mean by performance is that you really are giving yourself over to the poem so that it is saying and doing what it needs to do in front of an audience. That you're allowing it to happen in ways that others can really hear it. Some of the best readings I've ever done is that after I'd done the reading, I noticed that some people were crying. And somebody came up to me after reading and said, "Boy, that person is really distressed. You must be upset." I said, "No, I'm so happy." Because I got him where that poem did what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to get them feeling something deeply. So that's kind of what I want to work on today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some of the different aspects of presenting a poem. And one of the aspects of presenting a poem is really kind of preparing the poem ahead of time. So if you don't have a poem, see if you can grab one on your desk, because I'd like you to work with one. So if you have a book or something else, grab a poem, have something that you can look at, because I want you to work at it before you actually try to present and read it, so that you're getting a sense of how to get it ready. And one of the things that you can do is you can take a poem and put it down and begin to look at it line by line, word by word, and begin to say, what's happening here? What's happening emotionally here? And what do I need to do? And what sort of pace do I need to have? And what sort of inflections do I need to have? And all of those things you can mark on the poem. because one of the gifts I want to give you tonight is when you get up to read a poem, you don't want to be thinking. You don't want to be wondering, how am I going to read this? You have practiced it enough and done it enough. So when you get up, you're just delivering the poem and can pay attention to the audience, not to the text. If you don't work at it ahead of time and really practice it, what'll happen oftentimes is you'll be getting up there and you'll be reading a line and then you go, oh God, maybe what I should be doing. And that's what's happening in your head. You don't want to have that to happen. You want to just be able to get up and let the poem happen because you really worked on it. So one of the handouts that I have that I actually put together, I was telling Regina and Karen that I worked with a bunch of police officers years ago, and they were putting together a calendar, and the calendar had a bunch of poems on it, and they were going to then read the poems in public. And when they were starting to get ready to do that, they were all mortified because these were police officers. They were not people who were public speakers, and they were going to have to read a poem, oh my God, in front of an audience. So I put this handout together. And so what I'm going to do is just go through this very quickly and another one really quickly. And then what I want to really do is work the rest of the time with you on just your reading your poem and giving you little hints about things you can do in terms of pacing, terms of inflection, in terms of the level of your voice, and how you can use it. So one of the things when you're getting ready to read a poem is that as you're writing notes on it, you can begin to sort of bold or highlight different parts of the poem. And I'll sort of script down to the bottom of this. Can everybody see this all right? Mm-hmm. That sometimes when you need to pause, I put lines on the text that I'm reading. And the lines basically say, pause. And what it also says is, look at the audience. Because I think one of the things that happens most of the time with readings that don't go too well is somebody sticks their head down like this and just reads at the floor. You're not reading at the floor, you're reading at an audience. So whenever you have a pause, it gives you permission to look up. And if you've made a mark on the page, your eye will go back to the mark. So you won't lose where the text is. Again, if you practice it enough, you get used to kind of looking at those marks. And so you'll know where your next line is. The other thing you can do is that when you want to really hit something hard, a word that you know you want to really inflect, like in this poem, no and this, you kind of practice giving it a little more emphasis, a little more volume. And if you want to highlight it and then put it in italicized, it may be at that point you're using a tone that's the same as the word, pleading. So you're not saying pleading, pleading. You're giving it a pleading tone. So you can also put little points where you move your body. So as you're reading, you have a little script as to what you're supposed to be doing that goes along with the text. If you do this and don't practice it, it's desultory. It won't go anywhere because you'll be looking at the words and then you'll say number, gesture down. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. And then you'll lose the text. But if you practice this enough, you'll know that those little cues are there for you to do something at different points. And when you want to go slowly or quickly, all of that is happening. So when I'm preparing a poem, I'm sort of looking at a number of things. You know, what sort of inflection do I want to put on what words in a line? And where do I want to pause? Notice what I'm doing now. I'm pausing. And when I pause, what does that do to the audience? They immediately lean forward. And if they're hard of hearing, they wonder if they've lost their hearing. But oftentimes they lean in because they're going, wait a minute, he's just paused, something happened, and then boom, a word comes out. So whenever you put a pause in there, it's going to emphasize a word. I've studied a lot of comedians, and comedians are wonderful to look at and actually learn from because they really are masters of pausing. And oftentimes they pause just before there's a twist in the story or there's a line that's going to be a punchline. And that's where the pause comes in. So the pause sort of sets us up for something that's happening next. So as you're going through the poem, line by line, you're going to be looking at, where are the pauses? Poetry has built-in pauses in the way they're lined out. There's end stops, where there's a period, where there's a colon. where there's a comma, where there's a semicolon. All of those are moments where you're built into the syntax of a sentence pauses. And they may be where you want to pause when you're reading a poem. They may not be. You want to keep it moving on. But again, that's where you begin to go and analyze, what is my poem doing on the page? Practicing reading aloud is the best way to learn whether or not a poem is working. Because you then have to go, oh, wait a minute, this needs something else. I need more, another image. I need something here. I need to slow this down. It's going too fast. It's confusing. So that's sort of practice where you're sort of really looking at, where are the words that you want to emphasize. The key is that you don't want to pause at the end of every line, because then it gets monotonous. So it's syntactically, where in the sentence do I want to pause? And where do I want to have inflection, up or down, or soft or quick one? All of those things are going to sort of keep my attention as I'm listening to you. So those are things I want to do, is I want to sort of look at, where do I want to punch and where do I want to lay off certain poems. There's some of my poems that are really rapid. They move very quickly and I want to keep them moving, but I can't have the whole thing moving too quickly or I'll lose the audience. So there's some places where I need to really hesitate. And again, that's what you need to sort of figure out. The pauses and pace is, I think, the key to really being effective as a reader of poems. We don't allow ourselves that. So when you're first doing it and when you're first practicing it, give yourself a number of beats, so that if you have a pause sitting there, you can basically say, and then I, 1, 2, 3, and then you go on. So you kind of practice giving yourself silence in the middle of reading. Most people feel very uncomfortable doing that. But if you practice it, it'll become more natural to you. And guarantee it will draw the audience in more. Because most people, I think, who read in an average way, just read along and say this, and then they say that, and then they say this, and they say that. See what happens? It gets monotonous. But if you say, if I'm reading along and I say this, then I say that, and then I say this, it creates a little bit of hesitation, and it allows us to take that little group of words and then that little group of words and that little group of words in and sort of begin to digest them. So you're kind of giving yourself that permission. And then you're also giving yourself permission to look up. Now, for some of you, how you script the poem on the page could be different. If you want to, when you look up, to create not only a visual sort of look up sign, but also maybe drop down a couple of lines, even though that's not the way the poem is written. It will allow you to have some white space so that when you come down, you go to the next part of the poem that's in that below that white space. So that allows you to kind of have the hesitation without totally losing what's going on in the text. When you're nervous, and most people get nervous when they're reading poems. Does everybody get a little nervous when they read poems? Yeah, when you get nervous, you're on adrenaline, it's rushing. And so you're going to go faster than you normally would. So building in the hesitations early on is really important when you're reading, because otherwise you just keep going a lot faster and a lot faster, and you find yourself on overdrive, and then you lose what's going on the page. You can't find your text. You get sort of confused by that. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that I see a lot of poets who just sit there with their arms sort of hanging off their sides or a hand in a pocket. And these are nice things. They do a lot of work. So if you build in where you're going to make some gestures ahead of time, so you don't have to just think them up at the moment, then you can sort of just have that gesture. And it might be as simple as just moving the hand this way, or lifting your arm up, or dropping it down, or putting the hand like this. Any sort of number of gestures work really effectively. Bowing your head at a moment, turning your head to the side. All of those little things are really important. We as animals are geared to movement. If you watch TV, God help you, every 4 seconds, the image changes. If it was stayed just there flat, it would be great to go to sleep to, but there's always an image change every 4 seconds. So when you're up in front of an audience, having some movement is going to help because it will attract attention. It will keep them engaged with you. And likewise, you engage with them. So gestures are really important. But again, you can begin to look at the text and say, is there a gesture here that really makes sense? You can overdo it. It can be histrionic and just too theatrical. So I think you just have to begin to figure out what you feel comfortable doing and then figure out maybe there's some things I don't do that I could practice a little more. And the other thing that I say to you is anytime I'm doing a reading, I usually spend 3 days ahead of time. I'll just go through the whole reading and underline and make notes and just rehearse. So when I get up on that stage and when people say, it's your time to do to it, you're kind of ready. The other is that when you get up, these are just little bits things about just main thing is when you walk up to the podium, have your feet planted. If you're off balance and there's one foot that's hanging out or something like that, you're going to be off balance, literally, physically, and your spine's going to be curved. So the main thing is to kind of get there and stand up there and then do the thing that, just is of great mortification for many people. Look at the audience. Look at them. Adolf Hitler, he wasn't a very nice guy, but he was really a good speaker. And he used to sometimes, in one of his Munich speeches, he got up in front of the audience. He was introduced. He stood in front of the audience and he looked to the left. He looked to the right. He looked down. He looked up. He spent 3 minutes in silence. And so by the time he talked, people were ready. So you have time to be quiet and just to look around and get your presence and take a few breaths, which will kind of lower your motor down a little bit. And then make sure that you're looking up at the audience, you tell them what the poem is, and then you start to read. And again, all of those things I said before are there. The other thing is when your exit, to stay long enough so people don't see you fleeing the stage. I've seen some people, they finish the reading, they're off. Like, that's over, thank God that's finished. So those are sort of things to keep in mind. And I'll just go over another one which gives a little more information. And I'll just quickly share this. But essentially, how can I move this over here? There it is. This kind of goes in more detail about it. But what I think is what people said that they liked most, like with Diane Seuss and with other readers that they talked about, is they embody the poem. It comes alive because emotionally and Clifton, the voice is there, the tone is there, the physicality is there. The words begin to sort of take on that. So I did go over this piece here, one of Stanley Kunitz. If you've ever heard him read, I'd invite you to go and listen to like people like Donald Hall, Anne Sexton, Stanley Kunitz. I mean, they're wonderful readers. And like his is always incantatory. And when he reads something, you feel like he's pleading with you to hear his words, to not let the words just sort of fall off of his mouth into the floor, that it's taking you and grabbing you. So you can sort of hear the emotional intensity there. And so that's something to sort of look at is to find good readers that you can do it. Pacing, I did that. But here's the biggest thing that I keep emphasizing in the handouts is hesitations are the greatest gift I can give you tonight. Hesitations are the greatest gift I can give you tonight. Allow the words to come out at a pace that we can hear them. Allow the words to come out at a pace that we can hear them. No, you don't get it. Allow the words to come out at a pace that we can hear them. Totally different. So it's learning that gift of just knowing how to pace your poem that is really going to change the way in which you do it. The other is like music. There are some parts of your poem that are going to move very slowly. And each word is going to have import. And in other places, it's going to run along. It's going to be moving rapidly. It's going to be really intense. So if you have that variety, it's music. And that's what music does. And if it's just all one note, did, 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 it's good to fall asleep to. Some friend of my dad's once, when I was about to give a sermon, the first sermon I ever gave, he said, never worry about if an audience looks down at your watch. I said, oh, okay. He said, what you really need to worry about is when they look at their watch and start shaking it. That's dangerous. And if you have different paces to what you're doing on a page and different hesitation and all, it's going to create a certain tempo. And so look at the poem and sort of say, how is it moving on the page? And as you're asking that question, when you go back later to edit a poem, maybe your line breaks are wrong. I once asked Frank Bedard, because he wrote a lot of his early poems where they were scattered on the page. Words would be here and over here and over here and here. And I was fascinated with that, because if I tried that, I'd get, frightened to death. Like, what am I doing? And so I asked him, I said, what is the reason you have the words sort of paced out on the page like that? And you know what his response was? It's the way I heard it. It's the way it sounded to me. So the visual sort of spacing was telling us, hear that section, hear that section, hear this section. There's just, go slow. It's not fast. One of my mentors said is, poetry is life in the slow lane. It's not life in the fast lane. So just look at that. And again, when I did this already, just whenever you have certain words you want to hit powerfully, just bold them up, put them on italics if you want to soften them, to give yourself some notes. I use Frost's poem. This gives his heart a spell to shake. That's when the poem starts to move. All of this is very quiet and slow. There's a lot of ohs and ahs. It's almost sort of lyrical and almost like liturgy. And then bingo, that moves the poem on. And then the nonverbal, that's the hardest thing, I think, for most people to do. When I was working, I sung in the gay men's chorus for years. And sometimes when we're singing a really euphoric, lovely sort of piece with a lot of powerful, positive emotions to it, the chorus would be singing, and the director would say, smile. It's happy. You're supposed to be happy. You're not depressed. You're not taking Thorazine. You're kind of looking upward. So again, one of the things to practice yourself is to get in front of a mirror and, what sort of facial expressions do you have? And this is the part where you fold yourself arms differently. Some people don't have a lot of facial expressions. They could be talking about the death of a dog or their first love, and it's this. When you're reading a poem and when you're in front of an audience, the difference between that and just talking to somebody is there needs to be a little bit of exaggeration, because you're talking to 30 people. You got to reach them. And if you're just talking to them like you're talking to one person, it's not going to get over that little gap between you and where they sit. So a little exaggeration is helpful, as well as facial expressions. So if you're reading a poem and you're going along, and then there's a point at which it's going to turn, and it's going to turn because you practice it, and it's going to get sad, you could go. And then they know something's happening because your face is giving it away ahead of time. It's transitioning them to the next set of lines. Or if you're getting to a certain point where there's going to be a joke, you could, get a slight grin on your face. It cues them in to emotionally what's going to happen on that poem. So it's really begin to look at your facial expressions. And, it's funny. I've done a lot of workshops over the years, and I've sort of said to people, I've given them an emotional card, anger. And what their job was is to show that they're angry. And some people show that they're angry and they're going, it doesn't look angry to me. So it's kind of learning to sort of trust that you can have your face do different things to express what you're trying to show in the poem. And that takes work that you have to sort of think out ahead of time. And again, you're going to feel unnatural doing it. But if you practice it and you do it more often, it's going to become more natural and you'll do it more naturally. So it's almost like giving yourself permission to be a little awkward when you're practicing it and a little exaggerated. And then, when you get up and actually read it, it'll come out as if you're just doing it as you always have done it with anybody that you know. So those are the things to keep in mind when we're looking at a poem. So what I want to do now is something that's a little dangerous. I want you to sort of volunteer, that's dangerous, and see whether or not you have something in front of you that you'd like to read. And what I'd ask you to do is take about 5 minutes to take a look at what you have in front of you. You have a poem in front of you. Everybody have a poem in front of them? So boys and girls, I'm real pleased with that. So you got yourselves a poem. I'd like you to go and just make some notes on it and maybe underline a word or two and put some sort of like places where you want to do a little pausing. And then I'll have you read the poem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do coaching. And this is the fun part. So I'm going to have you read it and then read it again. I'll give you some suggestions and read it again and read it again. And so that you're going to be reading it 4 or 5 times. And each time I'm going to ask you to maybe do a little something different. I don't have the poems in front of me, so I'm going to have to go from what I'm hearing. But what I want to do is just a little coaching on how to work with pausing, how to work with inflection, how to work with facial expressions, and how to work with gestures as you're reading the pieces, so that you get a little sense of maybe a different way of looking at how you can present a poem when you're doing a reading. So if you take, I'm not sure what time it is, Karen, I don't have it's 7:08.
It's 7:08. Yeah, 7:08.
So we'll take until about, what would be about 5 minutes. This is where math is not going to help me at all. I'm a absolute wreck with math. So it's 7:15. We'll do 7:15. Work on the poem based on some of the suggestions I had, and then at 7:15 we'll get back and we'll ask you to volunteer. If not, I will call on you, and then you'll have to just read.
Bruce, can I ask you a question before we pause?
Please do. And anybody can ask anytime a question.
Yeah.
Don't let me monologue too
One
long.
of the challenges here is that I find it very different reading to my computer screen than I do reading to an audience, because you can look out and see faces and you're getting feedback. But if you're looking at your computer screen, I'm looking at the screen, but I'm not looking at the camera. And if I look at the camera, I can't look at my notes or the poem. And also sitting down in a chair, which we're all doing right now, gestures seem kind of awkward and so forth. So,
So what I say to you, what I say to you is, if you want to stand up, do that.
That won't work.
I've done lots of readings sitting down, and I think what you need to do, Ken, with readings in the Zoom medium is the same thing you do when you're reading in a live audience. To me, I'm reading to an audience when I'm reading to Zoom. When I look at that screen, I'm reading to every face that I see on that screen. So I don't think about the screen at all. I think about, how do I make this poem come across this medium, which is a huge gap compared to a live piece. How do I make it come alive in this format? And it's not easy to do. So I give yourself permission to just try to work it as much as you can to make it come alive when you're performing it to a screen. It's like a good actor does with a camera. I mean, oftentimes when they do a close-up of a good actor, the other person isn't even there in the studio, and he's talking to them. They've learned to present themselves, to emotionally deliver something, so it seems like it's real. There's actually a person that person's talking to, when in fact they're talking to the camera. So I think it's trying to get used to the fact that the camera doesn't tell lies. it will allow you to be who you are, and it will allow you to come through the camera to the audience. So I think it's sort of like just giving yourself permission to try to make this as embodied as you can when you're delivering it. And we'll see what happens. So
I'll do my best.
okay, do your best, and that's the challenge of this. I hope to do this live workshop sometime with this group. But meanwhile, take time, mark up your poem, and then we will present at quarter. Well, let's do about 17 after, since we took a little time to begin. Go to it.
And what's this? Early death and what's this?
Maybe a couple more minutes. If you want to practice reading it out loud to yourself with the sound off, please do. Take about one more minute, then come back. Okay, we're back. So as we're about to present, one thing that I know is always in my mind when I'm presenting is I'm dyslexic. And so preparing ahead of time was really important to me because one of my great gifts is that I will read things that are not there, or I will read a line that is backwards and forwards. And so if I don't really work at what I'm reading ahead of time, I'll always flub up in a poem. So that's why I spend an extra amount of time with it. But the other is to kind of like, this is a rehearsal time. So this is a good time to flub. And there's Rudolf Dreikar, as a psychologist, used to say one of the great gifts he could give people is the courage to be imperfect. I think that's what we all need. It's just the courage to be imperfect. And if you work at that, at being imperfect, eventually you get pretty good. And you get better at what you're doing. So this is a kind of chance for yourself to kind of just practice, getting some feedback, thinking about it, and then doing a little more practice and kind of just learning how you want to, whenever you read, think about how you read and what you read and what effect it has on the audience. So would anybody like to begin?
Yes.
Darcy got her hand up first. She's quick. All right. So I'll have you read your poem,
I'm very
and then I'll stop you, and then I'll give you some thoughts, and then I'll have you read it again. So go ahead.
All right. So this is a haiban, and the haiku is first, and then the prose. The title is Hope Threads the Needle. Grief moon, no safe passage to daybreak. Rivers of regret run through her, bear the weight of water. Find comfort in a face etched in black and gray treetops that appears in the fading light outside her window. Marry secrets to the grave. Bushwhack through a tangled wood of broken dreams, early deaths, and what's this? A crimson bud.
Great. Good. I liked it a lot. You have good inflection. You have good facial expression. There was lots of good physical movement as you presented it. At the end part of the first section, there was a part where there's a long phrase that went, and you read the whole thing, and it sort of mushed. And that's where I think you could sort of like begin to give us a little more pausing at the longer line. There was a longer line. I can't remember the exact image, but I kind of went, I want a little more pausing at that moment. So read it again. And when you get to that part, I'll tell you what I want you to do. So just read the whole thing again and then get. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Stop there. Or just read. Okay.
Read the whole thing. Yeah. Oh, you froze.
Hope threads the needle. What? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're all right.
No?
Yeah, we do.
Right.
You're all set.
Hope threads the needle. Grief moon, no safe passage to daybreak. Rivers of regret run through her, bear the weight of water. Find comfort in a face etched in black and gray treetops that appears in the fading light outside her window. Mary's secrets to the grave. Bushwhack through a tangled wood of broken dreams, early deaths, and what's this?
So stop
A
there.
crimson bud.
Have you stopped there? Go back to that where that phrase just where you just started that one there. There's a lot of information in that piece. It's a really beautifully written, dense piece. So you need to give it to us a little slower because you have 3 or 4 images that go boom, 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 boom. And what you need is to give us a little bit of time to take one in, another. Not a long break, but enough break. So that last I don't have the poem in front of me, but that last little section, see if you can read that a little slower and give us a little more time in between the images. Try that again.
I think you mean find comfort, but we'll see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Find comfort in a face etched in black and gray treetops that appears in the fading light outside her window.
That's really nice. Yeah. Now I got the whole piece, that whole section. Yeah. And before it just kind of mushed together and I couldn't get the sequence of images as they occur. So one of the things to be thinking about is, how do I present the sequence? And it means sometimes just paying attention to phrases, prepositional phrases or participial phrases or free modifiers, any things that are descriptive. Descriptions are like showing somebody a picture, bloop, bloop. And if you go bloop, 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 then I can't see the picture. So I need to really be able to see each picture as it's presented so that I can follow it and move along. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you,
Okay.
Bruce.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Joan, great. Your sound is off, so you're doing really well.
There we go. Dubinjai. Dubenik in Yiddish. Du, a tuba on the tongue. B, a kiss offered. No more than a crossroads, a bridge, faded wooden sign. Emptied shtetl, whose face moved over your lake's waters. Jews murdered on the roads, dumped in dense forest. Village of my grandparents, but who stayed behind? Stories untold in America, too sad for American children. By the waters of Lake Gazveja, against the orders of the Tsar and Hitler, loud again with klezmer, with Yiddish, Dubenik is mine.
Lovely, lovely. That's a beautiful poem. You're all wonderful writers. So here's where I think when you reread it, where you have the lines where you talk about the Jews murdered. Emotionally, that needs to come across more with more angst. I need to really feel that. And then you have, he stayed behind that line, and then you followed with I can't remember what's that line, who stayed behind. Read that whole line to me.
Village of my grandparents, but who stayed behind?
So that question needs to really get kicked. So it's not like who stayed behind. There's a lot of emotion there, I think, in back of that line. And so I think the way it needs to be presented so that I can feel it is like, who stayed behind? I mean, it's almost like you're pleading with us to sort of understand the import and portent of that moment. So work with that. And then the minute, where's the first line that has Jews in it? Read that.
Jews murdered on the roads.
That line needs to be severe and harsh. You know, I think the whole tone of that needs, I mean, it was said very much like, I water the garden. It's got to have more push to it, I think. So when those are the two places where I think it just needs a more emotional push. So try those again, read it again from the start. It's a beautiful, and I think the way you worked with the words at the beginning was very nice. It was slow, and we got each word. And so you paced them out very well. And I was right with you at that point. But when you started to get into the history and into the Holocaust, that's where emotionally the volume goes up. Volume meaning emotional volume. I don't mean sound volume. So I think that's the part where it needs to be more emphatic emotionally. So try it again.
Benjamin. Dubenik in Yiddish. Du, a tuba on the tongue. B, a kiss offered. No more than a crossroads, a bridge, a faded wooden sign. Emptied shtetl, whose face moved over your lake's waters? Jews murdered on the roads, dumped in dense forest. Village of my grandparents, but who stayed behind? Stories untold in America, too sad for American children. By the waters of Lake Azvezha, against the orders of the Tsar and Hitler, loud again with klezmer, with Yiddish, Dubenik is mine.
Wonderful. I want you to repeat the end where you have the klezmer and the
Okay.
music. I want that to be a tonal change. Because up to that point, the poem is very severe and down. And at that moment, when the klezmer music plays, I've been part of a Jewish family for years. It's exhilarating. Give us that. So read it with exhilaration one more time just at the end.
Loud again with klezmer, with Yiddish, Dubenik is mine.
Yeah. And then really hit it even. I'm going to push you. Hit it louder. Read the lines to me again.
Okay. Loud again with klezmer, with Yiddish.
Okay, here's where I'm going to ask you to work with your voice. Loud again with Kresner. Just give it to us. Make it loud, because that's what you're telling us. So see if you can say it, and then just give yourself permission to push the volume up. Go ahead.
Let me read the line before it, too.
Yes, do that, because that's a transition. Right? And what I loved is that after the question, you paused. That was wonderful, because you let the questions stay in our mind before you went to stories. And that's exactly what you want to do. You want us to just lean in on that line, and then you move to story. So that was really a nice transition you did there. Okay, go ahead.
By the waters of Lake Azvezha, against the orders of the Tsar and Hitler, loud again with klezmer, with Yiddish, Dubenik is mine.
That's it. Wonderful. Good. So you see in that poem, it's a wonderful poem because there's so much emotional arc in it. It goes one place that's very soft and gentle. It goes another place that's very gruesome and harsh, and then it ends with exhilaration. So it's allowing us to follow the arc of that poem with your voice and with your facial expressions. That will let us into what's actually going on the page. So that's good. Wonderful. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Michael, in the woods. Good.
Yeah. I'll try and remember how to do this now.
You will.
Okay, this one's called Blue Bonnets. 6 bare feet, still small enough to dance with butterflies, slipped out the door, across the lawn, and scampered over the white slat fence that keeps the goats from eating, mother's southern peas. They shimmied under the Texas barbed wire fence and leapt like gazelle past the awakening cattle. 4 of them ran down the hill and along the river, while 2 stopped to dance with newborn mice before running a little faster than the wind to rejoin the others at the fallen tree. There, like careful stitches of a seamstress, They slipped across waterlogged branches, jumped to safety, ran up the muddy bank, and into the heart of the fairy meadow. Six pixie feet stopped to wave at white tugboats puffing across the blue sky. Red, yellow, purple, but mostly blue magic wands swayed and scented the morning breeze with nectar. Soon, they retraced their steps, flying like fairies in anticipation until, slowing at the porch, they raised on their tiptoes to slip past the screen door and along the sun-dusted halls. Finally, at Mother's bedroom door, they hesitated before scampering in with birthday gifts of magic meadow bluebonnets.
Lovely. I like the way you at the end your pace changed and you gave us a lot more time to hear what each piece was doing. And you did some when you went to 6, from 4 to 6 to soon, those beginning pieces, there's a slight hesitation there, and you allowed us to sort of come into that section. At the beginning, I couldn't follow. You were moving too fast. So what I'd give you permission to do at the beginning is to kind of, it's a wonderfully dense poem. There's a lot of images that come 1, 2, 3, 4 at the rate of beginning. There's a lot of description, a lot of content at the beginning. And so you need to let that content out more slowly. So, and at some point, there's some movement that goes very fast because you have things happening very fast, and that works. The verbs there are wonderful. You hit the verbs, and the verbs keep us moving. You got a lot of wonderful verbs, but at the beginning, it's more noun focused, and therefore you need to give us a little more time to sort of absorb the photographs that you're creating right at the beginning. So see if you can start the photographs and maybe get down to where you say soon, and then stop where soon is. Okay, one more time, slower at the beginning. And again, this is the big thing about when you get up in front, take a breath and then give yourself permission to go slower at the start, because you'll tend to go fast at the start. That's what happens when you're nervous. You go fast, and then words begin to mush together and we can't follow them. So give yourself permission to kind of let us in slowly. Create the scene. You're creating the scene. Go ahead.
6 bare feet, still small enough to dance with butterflies, slipped out the door, across the lawn, and scampered over the white slat fence that keeps the goats from eating Mother's southern peas.
Great.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
They shimmied under the Texas barbed wire fence and leapt like gazelle past the awakening cattle. 4 of them ran down the hill and along the river, while 2 stopped to dance with newborn mice before running a little faster than the wind to rejoin the others at the fallen tree. There, like careful stitches of a seamstress, they slipped across waterlogged branches, jumped to safety, ran up the muddy bank and into the heart of the fairy meadow. Keep going on.
Yeah, that's good. So
Okay.
yeah, now you got you see how the paces. When you have when you have prepositional phrases and you have content heavy, noun heavy pieces, you need to kind of give that to us. When you have verbs that have just a noun and an object, you can move faster because we can follow that syntax. But when you have heavy pieces that have prepositional phases attached to them, a lot of description, a lot of images, they need to be given a little slower so that we can take in visually what's going on. You're a very visual poet, so you need to let us see the photographs unravel. And so this poem is a poem that it kind of goes slower, and then you have that. You did a really nice job just reading that, where they go faster, and there's a whole bunch of verbs that take it, and then you have another section I think that starts with 6 and then soon. So each one of those you can kind of give us a little hesitation, because it's almost like you're giving us a vignette, then you're giving us another vignette. So you need to kind of just allow us to sort of get into each one of those as we go along. Great.
Thank
Somebody
you.
else. Nice job. Yes, Judith.
Okay. This is called At Your Bedside. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
I don't
yes,
have,
yep, that was beautifully articulated. Yes.
okay. At your bedside. I now know why illness often waits for old age. We are the brave ones who capably endure all its endless demands in the strange new freedom retirement brings. For we can hobble through hoops and pry open doors, weather the blows slung as we mature, but breaks can't be avoided when bodies don't bend. Let me know that you linger and can make it through. Should you survive the onslaught, the blacks and the blues, the insults to body systems that buoyed you up in youth, all now worn thin by the years. Yell at me, scream at me, call me unwise. Just squeeze my tired fingers. Just open your eyes.
Nice, lovely. And it's nice. You paced it really, really well. And I think you give us pauses where we need to have them. Where read the line before "let me know." Like read 3 or 4 of those lines.
But
Um,
breaks can't be avoided.
yeah, kind of give me 2 lines above "let me know" and 2 lines after "let me know."
Okay, well, the 2 lines before let me know are, but breaks can't be avoided when bodies don't bend.
Okay.
Let me know that you linger and can make it through. Should you survive the onslaught, the blacks and the blues, the insults to body systems that buoyed you up in youth.
Okay, stop there. So that whole section there has a lot going on it emotionally. And so I think the inflection can begin to move up and down more than it is because you have so much going on. So read the first 2 lines that you just read.
But breaks can't be avoided when bodies don't bend.
So the pause there, I think, is right after when breaks cannot be avoided, pause, then the next section, and then there's a pause. There's like 4 in a row that come, and each of them kind of has a different feel to them. So let's just go one by one. Breaks cannot be avoided. Go ahead.
But breaks can't be avoided when bodies don't bend.
Okay, keep going.
Let me know that you linger.
So that's the one I want you to hit harder. Let me know. You're pleading with somebody. Whenever you have a injunction like that, you're pleading with somebody. So sort of let your voice go up, so that you're almost like pleading with me. See if you can read it like, you're talking right to me and you're pleading with me. And then pause at the end of that and then go to the next section. So try that.
Let me know that you linger and make it through. Should you survive the onslaught, the blacks and the blues.
Good. That's great. So that you emphasize that and then you sort of soften it, the black and the blue. So it gets softer after that. So the tone goes up and then it goes down. So you're kind of giving us different sort of rhythms there. What happened when you first read it is you kind of read it tonally just just a little bit. It didn't go up and down. It just kind of went, and I really want to feel your plead. You're pleading with us at that moment, and then sort of telling us what the reality is afterwards. But and then at the end, you really did a lovely job because your voice went up at the very end a number of times. You want to read the last 4 lines again, or 5 lines. I don't know where the syntax starts.
Yell at me. That part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yell at me. Scream at me. Call me unwise. Just squeeze my tired fingers. Just open your eyes.
Good. And you can even give it more time. The line goes, scream at me. Is that how it starts?
Yeah.
Scream at me. Scream
Yell
at me. So I give more, let each of them stand on their own. Scream at me. Yell at me. Notice the time I'm giving between it. So each of those has double line break. So it's a count of at least 2 or 3. Scream at me. So I got to take that in. Yell at me. I got to take that in. And then the next line, let me take that in. And so, parse that out more so that each of them gets its own whack, that we hear each one of them. Make sense?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Reverse my first 2 lines. I'll reverse them.
Okay. Oh, well. Somebody else.
Okay.
Thank you. Nice job. I'm trying to hit everybody if I can. Ken, good.
I'll give it a go here. This is one I wrote to deliberately have some pauses in it. So we'll see if I pass Bruce's muster here. So. Dark edge. Why not? I thought, the wind being calm and the afternoon pale as my son's hair. So I said, yes, you can go with the men of Lake Jeanette Fishing Club, who give $2 rides on a Sunday afternoon, swinging orange-vested toddlers into john boats and electric motored canoes. The boats zigzagged into beelines and curves, each captain styling the trip to his craft, and off went my son, zippered into a high visibility preserver, hugging his coil of ribs. I was thinking I hadn't asked the skipper's name or even gotten a good look at his face under that tugged down ball cap as the boat puttered into a far cove and disappeared. How long is long enough? 1 minute? 3 minutes? 5? On the dock of a small lake not 4 miles from our house, I listened to a toolbox of dads saw up yesterday's scores and believed the planks were buckling under me like untendoned bones. Most thoughts slip like leaves down a spillway, but some catch a dark edge and eddy forever. When the boat reappeared, my son waved like a flame in a signal torch. As I grabbed him off the dock, he pitched back, stiff-arming us into a capital Y, shrilling, "Guess what we saw?" I touched his chattering mouth, watched the boatman lift another child, and thought, okay, it's all right. Nothing happened. And what was I thinking?
Really nice, really nice. And the pauses at the end really worked. And when you said, 1, 2, 3, that's nice because it kind of really has it in. The part where, again, at the start, it's heavy on content. And the first couple of lines flowed really well. And then you got into some description that kind of went very fast. So it was hard for me to sort of take it all in. So I think there's some places where you could do a little bit of pausing, like in the first 5 lines. I'm not sure how of the lineation of the poem, but so maybe just to start at the beginning and what's happening emotionally at the beginning for you?
Am I supposed to answer that? Or
Yeah.
I'm putting my son out there for his enjoyment and entertainment, and I don't have a single worry about it. It all looks fun,
Okay.
and then it changes.
Okay. So it's like that's the arc. So it's sort of like the it's light at the beginning, and then it begins to sort of get a little the tone of the voice needs to sort of shift a slight bit. And I'm not sure that happens right at the very beginning, but try the beginning again.
Sure. Dark edge. Why not? I thought, the wind being calm and the afternoon pale as my son's hair. So I said, yes, you can go with the men of Lake Jeanette Fishing Club, who give $2 rides Sunday afternoon, swinging orange vested toddlers into John boats and electric motored canoes.
Good, because that's much better, because I got exactly what was happening, because I wasn't sure what was happening with the sun, and I really need to know that he's
Okay.
going off. I wasn't sure he was
Slower.
going off
Mhm.
because it happened so fast. So it's
Okay.
just giving us enough time to sort of ingest. I'm letting my son go with them,
Right.
and then that's the setup. So now I can follow the rest of the poem through it. And I think yeah, that was the only place where I was not sure what was happening. Give me where's the section where you are a bit worried as a dad? What lines are
Well,
those?
there's the second stanza begins some hesitation, but the third stanza is the one that's the real concern, where how long is long enough?
Okay, so do that one again. And again, I think that question, I think you did a nice job with it. Try it again.
Okay. How long is long enough? 1 minute? 3 minutes? 5? On the dock of a small lake not 4 miles from our house, I listened to a toolbox of Dad's, saw up yesterday's scores, and believed the planks were buckling under me like untendoned bones. Most thoughts slip like leaves down a spillway, but some catch a dark edge and eddy forever.
So the part that the middle part of that can feel vocally more ominous. So I'll stop you. Start that whole section, and then I'll stop you at a certain point. Go ahead. Read that whole section again.
How long is long enough?
So again, what's the nature of that question? Are you feeling scared or worried?
Yeah.
Okay, so how
Once a
long?
child disappears from your sight, you're thinking, well, how long does it take something to happen?
So I think the way in which sort of I'm thinking of that one, how long is long enough? So give us even hesitation within that question. Try that again.
Okay. How long is long enough? 1 minute? 3 minutes? 5? On the dock of a small lake not 4 miles from our house, I listened to a toolbox of Dad's, saw up yesterday's scores, and believed the planks were buckling under me like untendoned bones.
So that's the part. That's the part I want to really feel sort of a dangerous quality to it. And I don't know if it's lowering the voice or what, but I want that to sound more ominous than it does. And I'm not sure how the inflection might work, but try that again where it's sort of like make it darker, make it feel darker. And I think it could be you can take out the vowels and pull the vowels more out in that section. Okay.
Okay. I listened to a toolbox of Dad's, saw up yesterday's scores, and believed the planks were buckling under me like untendoned bones.
Wonderful. Yeah. So it's like that emotionally is like the core image of that poem, and you hit it. You hit it that time. But the other time it's also dense. You went so fast over it. I missed that. I want to get hit at that moment with that image. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Good. We have only 9 minutes left. Would anybody else like to go? Is this helpful?
Oh yeah, thanks.
Oh, good, good. The cat said yes. That's so good. Would anybody else like to go? Volunteers. Christy, would you like to try? You don't have to, but you
Hold on. Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear.
Okay, I'll give this a shot.
All right, give it a
Um,
shot. That's all we ask.
This is called a mirrored Fibonacci freeze warning. Snow dappled violets outside backyard windows as I listen to him bloom fresh driven blows to her leached self-worth. She cried pretty, pretty, wordlessly begged my silence until coffee set bleary-eyed smiles.
Wow, that's a nice, lovely, intense piece. I'll ask you like I did with Ken. When she asked, "Pretty, pretty," is that the line she asked?
She cried pretty.
Pretty. What's emotionally going on there?
The person that I was with was actually crying and looking at me, asking me not to say anything with her eyes, and cried pretty being the Southern phrase. You don't cry loud. You're just crying with tears just running down your face, but you're silent.
Okay, so that has a lot of movement to it emotionally. So it's almost like she cries, pretty, pretty.
Right.
So put a lot of hesitation in that. Put a lot of hesitation throughout the poem because it feels like it's a poem where it's a start-stop because there's images sort of come and then they stop and they come and stop. So see if you can create some more tension between words. And on something like this, you could give as much of as a 2 count or 3 count between pretty, 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 and take a breath between them. So to give more breath to each word. So each word begins to kind of have its own sort of resonance. But if you say pretty, pretty, it's like a bird tweeting instead of having an emotional range to it. So as you go, give yourself time to breathe between the words, it actually come out better. And the same thing for the earlier part of the poem. Just give yourself time to breathe between little phrases. So try it again.
Okay. Snow dappled violets outside backyard windows as I listen to him bloom fresh driven blows to her leached self-worth. She cried pretty, wordlessly begged my silence until coffee set bleary-eyed smiles.
Good, 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 good. And bleary-eyed smiles, is that an upbeat or a downbeat in terms of down? Okay. So bleary-eyed, and then sort of drop your voice almost on smile, kind of drop the voice. Because what happens is it's bleary-eyed smiles, we're all the same note. And so I think see if you can read the last two or three lines and drop the smile at the end.
Okay. Coffee set bleary-eyed smiles.
Yeah, it's just let it settle in. Yeah, nice, good.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Oh, good, good. So what I'm doing is basically what I'd like you to do. You ask yourself, like, what is happening emotionally on that line? What are those words doing? And if they're doing, and if you say I'm hurt or worried or frightened or happy or sad or horrified, then the voice needs to do that too. Otherwise, it's like just saying the steak was really nice. I cut off her head. No, that doesn't work. You got to give it whatever it needs to happen. And I think really good poems, if you study them and look at them, emotional, there's a whole range of things that are happening within a line as well as at the end of the line. And oftentimes really good poets will create caesuras, breaks in the middle. Well, they're basically telling you there's a pause here. And if there's an end stop period, there's a pause here. And if there's enjambment where the line sort of slides over, then there's not as great a pause, but there might be, because one phrase may need some time to set in before the next phrase comes on and before you pronounce it. So it's really kind of training your voice to kind of mirror what's on the page. And I would add, sometimes to rewrite your poem based on what you're doing. Because if you're finding like, wait, that's not the way I say it, well, okay, it needs to be different on the page. I need to say it in a way that visually it sort of replicates what I'm doing auditorily when I'm speaking a poem. Thank you all for taking a risk. That was really great. I enjoyed. So Ken, did that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate it. It's always good to
Okay.
be coached a little bit on the particulars. Like, you know what the poem wants to achieve, but it's easier to read a dense poem to yourself than it is to hear a dense poem with no script in front of you. So it's good to be reminded that you really need to go slower in those passages with description and nouns and verbs. And what you told me about the first stanza or two is good. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's, if you read Shakespeare, he's not a bad writer. He breaks up lines for pauses.
Sure.
I mean, oftentimes wherever there is some sort of punctuation or line break, that was telling actors, you got to pause here. You can't move along. There's a lot. I'm doing a lot here. So this can't be read quickly. So the main thing is poetry is life in the slow lane. And if you're going to deliver it to somebody, you need to kind of make sure that they can hear everything that you're saying. So you can't rush through a poem. And the other gift I can give you is that you're going to tend to rush. All of us do when you're nervous and when you're first presenting. So take a breath, get your feet under you, and then make sure you have lots of pauses in your first section of the poem so that you get a certain rhythm down before you go, because otherwise you just pull the truck up and dump the whole thing on us. And then pretty soon we're kind of going, what the hell is going on here? So it's really important to kind of deliver it in a way that we can take it in a line by line, word by word, image by image, and follow you as well. And how do you keep interest when you're doing slow? Tone, pitch, pause, gestures, all of those things keep the audience engaged. So you can read slower as long as you add those things in. If you read slow and you don't add those things in, boring. So you gotta kind of work at try to add all those things to what you're doing to make it work. Thank you for taking your time this evening for.
Thank you.
Let's all come off mute and just give Bruce
Oh,
hand. We are
Yeah.
just so fortunate to have had you come and work with us this evening on how to not clear that room while we're delivering a poem.
great.
Very important
This
these
is
days.
great.
So again, we thank you, and we thank you all for coming. This event, it is being recorded. It will be put on our YouTube channel, and you will be able to find it on the NCPS Facebook page. I would also like to remind you that on April 17th at 7 o'clock, we will have a new book launch featuring A.E. Hines. And so we're very excited about that. Look for the event. If you go to our Facebook page, you'll see, and you look up where our events are, you should see that page. Click on it, say you're coming, and we'll just be really happy to see you in that room.
And
I would like to give Karen the opportunity to, Karen?
I just want this was fabulous. Thank you all for being here. And Bruce, thank you. This is just a treasure trove of happy maker for poets and people that
Yeah.
listen to poetry. Oh my goodness, this is fabulous.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sometime
Thank
I'd
you
like to
so
do it
much.
live at one of the conferences, maybe, in September
Oh,
up here.
It'd be
So,
great.
yeah,
It really,
this
it really
was-
should be required hearing for everybody who intends to go to an open mic the rest of their lives. Yes,
yes,
would certainly have improved a number of experiences. I think.
yeah.
yeah, I can
Oh, and-
remember leaving some poetry readings and kind of going,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
the
Kenneth, you reminded me saying open mic. When y'all come to the reading with A.E. Hines, bring a poem that you have been applying these new skills to that we just learned tonight for open mic. We will be doing an open mic following Earl's reading, and it's going to be awesome. So bring your game.
That was what
Great.
date again? April
17th,
17th.
April 17th. That starts at 7, right,
7
Regina?
o'clock, yes.
Okay.
Probably 7 till, well, everybody's gonna get to read, so
Yeah.
it goes till whenever.
Right, right. So, yeah, thank you again, everyone. And you all just continue this wonderful evening.
you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
All right.
Thank you.